Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into something that is just mind-blowing. We're looking at the epic mystery behind one of the boldest claims in human history, China's incredible 5,000 years of continuous, unbroken civilization. 5 millennia. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, right? Like, how does a civilization literally survive that long? Well, the answer actually starts in the most unexpected place you can imagine.
Picture this. A farmer is just out working their field, right? Digging in the dirt, having a regular day. But then, clink. Their shovel hits something. They pull up a turtle shell. Now, at first glance, you or I would probably just toss it aside. Just old debris. But looking closer, it's completely covered in these tiny, deliberate, carved symbols. It's literally a voice from the ancient past, just waiting to be translated.
And when I say ancient, I really mean it. This unassuming little shell, it's over 3,000 years old. It's been buried there, completely undisturbed, for 3 millennia. But honestly, the age isn't even the craziest part of this discovery. It's what those carved symbols actually mean that reveals this mind-bending historical secret. Get this. What completely shocked archaeologists is that a modern Chinese speaker can look at those exact same 3,000-year-old carvings today and actually recognize the writing. I mean, just think about the gravity of that for a second. You're reading a message carved into a turtle shell 3,000 years ago, and the language hasn't been lost to the sands of time. It is a literal living link right back to their ancestors.
So where did these come from? They date way back to the Shang dynasty. We're talking 1600 to 1046 BC. And people back then used these shells for divination. It was a whole process. First, you'd carve your question onto the shell. Then, you'd toss the shell into a fire until the intense heat made it crack. Finally, you'd look at the distinct shapes of those cracks to read the answer. They believed these were direct messages from the gods.
When you break it down, it was basically a really dramatic way to get a quick answer. You'd carve something totally relatable, like, hey, is it going to rain tomorrow? And then wait for the universe to reply. It was essentially ancient texting, just, using fire instead of a smartphone. It really goes to show that human curiosity and the need for quick answers hasn't changed all that much.
And seeing the evolutions side by side really highlights why this is such a big deal. On one hand, you have the Shang dynasty bone carvings, and on the other, modern-day Chinese characters. Obviously, they're not absolutely identical. Languages naturally shift and adapt, but the core structure, it's right there. You can literally trace the visual evolution, bridging 3,000 years of writing from those ancient bones straight to the characters billions of people use today. It's absolutely incredible.
But here's the thing. A 3,000-year-old unbroken writing system, that is actually just the tip of the archaeological iceberg. If we really want to unpack that claim of 5,000 years of history, the Shang dynasty isn't our starting line. No, we have to go way, way further back into the mists of time.
To put this massive scale into perspective, we have to rewind past the Shang dynasty all the way back to over 5,000 years ago. We're talking about an era defined by something called the Lianzhu culture. This is the era that truly anchors that staggering 5 millennia claim we were talking about earlier.
And the Lianzhu? They weren't just barely scraping by in tiny scattered tribes. Far from it. They were a highly advanced society. Over 5,000 years ago, these people were building sprawling, highly organized cities. They totally mastered working with jade, which is incredibly difficult to carve, by the way. They made advanced tools, and they had this deep, complex belief system around the afterlife. This wasn't just a basic settlement. It was the bedrock of a sweeping civilization.
Now this is where the sheer uniqueness of this whole timeline really hits home. Think about other majestic ancient civilizations for a second. The Maya, the Egyptians, the Romans. Absolutely brilliant, powerful societies, right? But eventually, their ancient cultures drastically changed. Their original languages faded, and their writing systems were completely lost to time. They vanished. But China? China survived. And let me be clear, that survival was not a walk in the park. It wasn't 5 millennia of peace and quiet. We're talking about a brutal, epic crucible. Through devastating wars, massive foreign invasions, and this relentless, chaotic cycle of ruling dynasties rising and falling, the core of Chinese civilization somehow held on. They absorbed the shocks that literally shattered other empires apart.
Which brings us to one of the most fascinating twists in all of history. Even when overwhelming foreign forces physically conquered the territory, like the fierce Mongols or later on the Manchus, they didn't erase the culture they took over. Actually, the exact opposite happened. The conquerors ended up adopting Chinese culture. They learned the language, they used the existing societal rules to govern. The cultural foundation was so deeply rooted that it literally assimilated its own invaders.
And that leads to this beautiful kind of cinematic metaphor for historical continuity. It's like a river. The water keeps flowing even if the emperor changes. Think about that. The political figures on the surface, the emperors, the dynasties, they're just boats on the water. They come and go. But the culture, the language, the people, they are the river itself. And that river just keeps flowing forward, no matter who claims the throne.
So, the big takeaway here? When you hear that famous phrase, "We have 5,000 years of history," don't just think of it as a number on a timeline. It's so much more than that. It is an epic, sweeping story of cultural survival against almost impossible historical odds. It's an absolute testament to the resilience of human culture. Looking at the very notes that inspired this explainer, you can see exactly how this rich historical narrative gets pieced together. From that single aha moment of a farmer finding a shell in the dirt, all the way up to these massive concepts of cultural assimilation in the river of time, we can trace how this staggering continuity is actively understood and celebrated right now. It's this incredible, unbreakable thread tying the ancient past to our living present.
But of course, the eternal river flows even further back, and it leaves us with the ultimate historical cliffhanger. Before the Shang dynasty, before those awesome oracle bones, the legends speak of the very first dynasty, the Xia. But did this mysterious dynasty actually exist? Or is it just a myth, an echo of the past, waiting to be unearthed by another farmer digging in the dirt tomorrow? That's one of history's biggest mysteries, and it just proves that even after 5,000 years, this story is still being written.